A description of the film and the historical events.
My name is Lachlan Blue, and I will be describing the film Hotel Rwanda and the relationship it has to historical events. Hotel Rwanda was released in 2004, and the movie is set within Rwanda in 1994, during the civil wars of the Hutu and the Tutsi. The movie does not recount the war itself, but focuses more specifically on the manager of the Sabina Hotel who was able to save the 1,200 lives. Hotel Rwanda gives a Hollywood insight into what the Rwandan Civil War was like while the rest of the world turned their heads in 1994. The film focuses on Paul's family in the midst of the war. Paul, the father, is the manager of the hotel, and the movie concentrates on how Paul deals with the refugees entering the hotel and how he manages to protect these people. Not only does Paul have these issues to deal with, he also must battle with problems of his own simultaneously, including the fact his wife is Tutsi and therefore wanted by the Hutu. Multiple times throughout the film, Paul attempts to bribe generals and other officers of the Rwandan army with alcohol and money in an effort to gain status and therefore protect his wife from threat. It can be seen that the movie has a close relationship to the actual historical events. Genocide occurred to many thousands of people in Rwanda during that time. It was estimated that 800,000 to 2 million people were slaughtered within their homes and streets. One particular scene depicts Paul and his family witnessing a neighbour being hauled from his home and brutally bashed in the street. Another comparison can be drawn between the UN's involvement in the Civil War and the subsequent depiction of this within the novel. The UN made attempts to maintain peace in Rwanda. However, they had very minimal resources and the scope of their actions was very limited by statute. Similarly, in the film, UN officers were also told clearly that they had to refrain from using any force as a form of peacekeeping, further emphasizing their restricted abilities to assist. The movie implies that when the president's plane was shot down. My name is Lachlan Blue, and I will be describing the film Hotel Rwanda and the relationship it has to historical events. Hotel Rwanda was released in 2004, and the movie is set within Rwanda in 1994, during the civil wars of the Hutu and the Tutsi. The movie does not recount the war itself, but focuses more specifically on the manager of the Sabina Hotel who was able to save the 1,200 lives. Hotel Rwanda gives a Hollywood insight into what the Rwandan Civil War was like while the rest of the world turned their heads in 1994. The film focuses on Paul's family in the midst of the war. Paul, the father, is the manager of the hotel, and the movie concentrates on how Paul deals with the refugees entering the hotel and how he manages to protect these people. Not only does Paul have these issues to deal with, he also must battle with problems of his own simultaneously, including the fact his wife is Tutsi and therefore wanted by the Hutu. Multiple times throughout the film, Paul attempts to bribe generals and other officers of the Rwandan army with alcohol and money in an effort to gain status and therefore protect his wife from threat. It can be seen that the movie has a close relationship to the actual historical events. Genocide occurred to many thousands of people in Rwanda during that time. It was estimated that 800,000 to 2 million people were slaughtered within their homes and streets. One particular scene depicts Paul and his family witnessing a neighbour being hauled from his home and brutally bashed in the street. Another comparison can be drawn between the UN's involvement in the Civil War and the subsequent depiction of this within the novel. The UN made attempts to maintain peace in Rwanda. However, they had very minimal resources and the scope of their actions was very limited by statute. Similarly, in the film, UN officers were also told clearly that they had to refrain from using any force as a form of peacekeeping, further emphasizing their restricted abilities to assist. The movie implies that when the president's plane was shot down.
Hutu extremists carrying out mass genocide. Hey guys, my name is Jared. My question is the short summary of the film The War depicts. The movie Hotel Rwanda depicts the war between the Hutu and the Tutsis. The Hutus are noted the years of oppression and being mistreated by the Tutsis as they were left in charge by the Belgians who the country Rwanda was colonised by. The war takes place in 1994 with years of civil war coming to an end with a signing of the Ashrad peace deal by the Hutu president. However, the plane was shot down just after the signing of the peace deal. Unaware of who shot the plane down, the Hutu extremists were quick to blame the Tutsi rebels and proceeded, surprisingly, with a well-structured attack on the Rwandan government to seize power. Upon doing so, they murdered the Tutsi Prime Minister along with 10 UN Belgian guards. This scared the Belgians, and they ended up withdrawing from Rwanda, and basically the Hutu extremists were now in charge of the government and had addresses and identification papers of all the Rwandan people, which identified them as either Hutus or Tutsis. Roadblocks were now set up around the Rwandan country, and mass murder started on all the Tutsis. Countless lives were lost over the next few weeks, with acts of genocide being committed. The Hutu extremists would not rest until the Tutsis paid for what they had done, and in doing so, eliminate them altogether. The Tutsis and moderate Hutus tried hiding in schools, hospitals and churches, and even hotels where they think they were safe. However, murder of women and children continued. Word slowly spread to the UN, but movement was very slow and unaware that it was either just a civil war or genocide. However, word reached the French about the situation that was going on. They proceeded to send in a quick reaction force team to help extract people. However, they only proceeded to help the Westerners who were caught in the crossfire. The other refugees were left to fend for themselves. It wasn't until the journalists, prior to the French arriving, their media coverage was a big information release of what was going on and the mass murders that were being committed. The UN at the time was finding it hard to believe genocide was being committed, and not just civil war, until this media coverage sort of solidified what they were only presumed. From this hesitation, 800,000 Tutsis and Hutus were killed in a matter of weeks. Slowly, resources were moved towards Rwanda at the UN, and the UN urged the other African countries to help, as manpower was short from the other Western countries. UN forces arrived to help rescue the remaining Hutus and Tutsis caught in the crossfire. Upon retreating to the established UN refugee camps, it is visible that the Rwandan Patriotic Force, which is made up of Tutsis and Hutu moderates who just want peace, and they were seen pushing back the Hutu extremists out of Rwanda. It wasn't until the Rwandan Patriotic Front pushed out all the Hutu extremists that the war had ended and genocide had finished. Thank you.
French troops arriving as part of a French-led UN peacekeeping mission. Critical reflection and insight into what the movie's message about war is. In the film, various themes relating to war are explored. The audience becomes aware of the political, cultural, and social situation of Rwanda during 1994. Immediately, we are introduced to the social standards and ways of Rwandan society. The general message about war that we perceive is the way in which states dishonor textbook standards, such as just war theory, and particularly in this film, the way in which civilians or non-combatants have been mistreated. It demonstrates how such standards are ineffective and proves why they remain only theories. No one can prepare for what eventuates during times of war, because not only is it the powerful political figures making the supposed just decisions for the greater good of the state, but other factors come into play. Namely, guerrilla or rebel groups, as in the film, who interfere with the justice war theories and harm the civilians. The state has a responsibility to protect its people, but this film is a prime example of how Rwanda was subjected to genocide and the massacre of thousands of innocent people. Also showcased in the film is the UN Security Council authorizing France's intervention in Rwanda, attempting to end the civil conflict and genocide between the Tutsis and Hutus. In reality, this intervention came too late. Approximately 800,000 Tutsis had been killed already. In the film, Paul, played by Don Cheadle, is positive about the media coverage, believing that the Western powers will come to intervene and end the conflict. But Colonel Oliver, played by Nick Nolte, says to Paul that the West is unlikely to do so. This is in line with the criticism that the UN states received because they did not meet their moral responsibilities in addressing this particular crisis. And as mentioned, the French intervention came at a very late stage after 800,000 people had already been killed. Much more could have been done to prevent the situation, but the West was not quick to jump in and help. The film's message about war is a demonstration of how Rwanda struggled to protect civilians from the conflict, leading to the massacre of approximately 800,000 innocents. What also is highlighted by the true story of Paul Rusesabagina is a more positive message regarding war. Even in times of conflict, Paul, a Hutu, was determined to protect as many Tutsis as he could. This true story portrays how acts of humanity are especially significant during times of war.
My opinion influenced by the ratings.
Hello, my name is Anthony. I'll be doing the reading about the genocide that happened in Rwanda, and I'll be doing question number 4. So pretty much what happened was there was a genocide of Tutsi population within Rwanda from the Hutu extremists. In the beginning there was a lot of propaganda from the extremists saying that they want to kill off the Tutsi population, and so this led to a lot of riots and violence all across Rwanda. So the Tutsi president called for a peace treaty to be signed and wanted the UN to take control of the whole situation. The day before the peace treaty was supposed to be signed, the Hutu extremists actually assassinated the Tutsi president and started the eradication of the Tutsi population. This led for the Rwanda government to create the United Nations Assistance Mission for Rwanda. They initially sent troops to help protect civilians. However, they ended up only protecting military bases and key locations, such as the airport. The Security Central, which was the military fighting of the extremists, asked for some help from the Western nations. However, they did not really want to help, as they did not want their own people to die, and any attempt of the Security Central to call it a genocide was shut down, as the Western forces called it a civil war. New Zealand created the idea of a draft to send troops to protect civilians. However, again, the Western countries did not want to call it a genocide, so it never happened. France came in to help, but it was only for a limited time until the United States sent resources for the United Nations Assistance Mission for Rwanda to start phase 2 of their mission. Even though there was a criticism for the French forces to be there, it was the only humanitarian act that was actually done at the time. So the French started Operation Turquoise. However, after knowing former French allies had died in the genocide, the French mission changed to protect French-influenced areas. Operation Turquoise ultimately failed to be a humanitarian act, as they forgot about civilians living in the farmlands, and so they were picked off one by one and only protected people within the city. After the United Nations Assistance Mission for Rwanda finally agreed that it was a genocide, the US and British forces came in and killed off and pushed out any Hutu extremists. During the whole genocide period, African forces were there to help Rwanda, but they weren't able to do anything until the Western nations could provide assistance through necessary equipment and tactics to help out. So pretty much I watched the movie before I did the reading, and so the reading actually answered a lot of moral questions that I had throughout the movie. So pretty much why did the UN take so long to do what they did? Why didn't the Western forces actually do anything until late? And what was French's more role there? So pretty much the UN didn't really do anything because their credibility at the time was very low from the whole Somali situation that happened just before, and so they didn't get a lot of resources or funding at that time. The US did not want to get involved because the Somali situation did end up killing a lot of their men, so they didn't want to send out more troops, and so they thought the whole situation would happen again. French only were there just so they can get military power, pretty much, just so that they can show the world, look, we're still strong, we can do things. And the UN actually did have intel at the start of the whole situation, so that if they sent out 5,000 troops, they could have saved hundreds of thousands to millions of lives. So pretty much from the reading, what I learnt was Western forces will only help out if they'll only get anything in return. So if they've got military power, political power, or money just to help out, that was the only time that they'll actually help. So this is what I learnt from the reading, so thank you.